we're going to talk about some of the sales happening here for within Georgia. In Georgia, how does it operate as a state? So it is a redemption deed state, kind of like Texas in some ways. In that, they still hold auctions every single month, but there's some differences in that they have a 1-year redemption period on the property, and so versus Texas, which a lot of the properties there are going to have 6 months. So you have 1-year redemption period in Georgia. You also have a couple of different types of sales. They have judicial sales and non-judicial sales that they hold there. The non-judicial sales are the deeds that have the 1-year redemption period. So at the end of those, you actually still have to kind of extinguish their right of redemption. But those are for the non-judicial sales. But the judicial sales are properties that have a shorter redemption period of 60 days. But they're, I guess, not available everywhere or not always happening, I guess, as we've looked for them.
Yeah, well, counties have a couple of different choices. There's counties out there that will have nothing but non-judicial auctions. There's some counties now that only have judicial auctions. And then there's counties that have a combination of both. So it's really going to depend on the county on which method they're going to use. But with the non-judicial, these are your normal Georgia tax deeds that people have been talking about for decades, where you have a 1-year redemption period. You're not going to have any ownership rights. And then when you buy that, you're going to have to go ahead and extinguish their right to redeem. So you've kind of got to go through it, kind of like a little bit of a mini foreclosure there at the end to reserve your right. And then there's going to be these states that are counties that are doing the non-judicial sale. And this is where you're going to have the opportunity where they're only going to have a 60-day redemption period. And at the end of the 60-day redemption period, you're not going to have to go through the process of redeeming on their right to foreclose because it's went through this judicial foreclosure.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how they've got both of those here. And how if it does go through the judicial, then you don't have to go through, removing their right to redeem. But if it's a non-judicial, you basically have to do that. You basically kind of, in a way, kind of foreclose at the end.
Yeah, to a degree. And so what's kind of interesting, if you're looking underneath this is just for Henry County, Georgia, but decided to include it. It talks about how when we're talking about these judicial sales, that the title will vest absolutely into the purchaser after the right of redemption. So after that 60 days, eliminating the need for post-sale barment, which is essentially kind of like that foreclosing on their right to redeem. And also it says, and quiet title action. Now, I don't know how true that is. We haven't tested that, but that is interesting that, that it's possible that you might not even need to go through quiet title. So you would probably need to consult an attorney on that because I'm not sure about it, but that's what they're claiming from the county. And the county usually is not going to put something like that unless it's going to be true. They have these looked over by their attorneys, but in this particular county, they have both kind of sales.
Yeah, so that's interesting too. That'd be huge, at least as far as what they say there, with barring, the need for quiet title action. That would be awesome.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. This is something that's just been happening the last couple of years with these judicial foreclosures, which means that they take it through the court process. There's going to be more involved with it. And in a lot of ways, you're getting a cleaner title than you would, and you're going to get that pretty quickly within 60 days. That or you're going to make 20%. So, from what we've seen in counties that do a combination of both, they're going to have kind of the better properties with that judicial foreclosure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go ahead and take a look at the county. In fact, what was kind of interesting is I know these guys have had at least one sale, but none of these had any dates on them. And so the first ones that I was able to pull up with was this one here in November.
That's interesting.
And I don't know if they just didn't post them, but they didn't have anything there. But this is where I could get some of the sale results. So the first property we're going to look at is this one right here. And we can see some of the details on it right here. Now, one thing that we were talking about with our coaching students when we were going through stage 1 due diligence is reviewing this assessment information. But here in the case, we may have photos of it. You can see all of these different things here that are going to give us additional information on it.
Yeah, there we go. So we've got a photo of the house from
2024.
2024. So a couple of years old here, but not too old.
Yeah, we can kind of get an idea of the value of it. And here's the property located right here. So, I was kind of wondering how good a deal could this really be, but you can see it's a lot nicer homes right next to it. I mean, some of these are newer homes right here, pretty new homes. So it's this one right here, and they valued it at about 192,000. So it was picked up for 44,000, and valued about 192. And in looking at, if you were to really do a nice rehab on this, something like an addition, these homes right here are like $300,000 to $400,000 homes plus.
And how much did this sell for again?
It sold for 47.
So 47,000. Wow, that sold for really not very much. I mean, it sold for a very low percentage of value here.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna need work, but I think that if it was rehabbed and maybe you even put, I think with the value of the property next to it, it'd be worth even doing something like an addition on it. Or you could just turn around and sell it for 120 grand and make 60, 70 grand on it quick.
Yeah, and I was just looking. I saw, a question from Greg about this. Now, I think this sale that we're looking at here, this one is one of their non-judicial sales, right? Regular non-judicial sale.
I should have looked that up, but I believe it was a non-judicial sale. I'd have to check to make it 100% sure on that.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because even the judicial sales do have kind of an opportunity there for redemption here, and the rate of return is still pretty good. In fact, it seemed like it was. We're gonna have to dig into that a little bit more here. 20%. Yeah, 20%. It seems like is that a flat rate?
Yeah, it's going to be a flat rate. So, in fact, we're going to look at some properties here in a little bit, some land where you can see it already redeemed, and this person made 20% on their money.
Nice. Yeah. In fact, yeah. So, like, Greg was basically asking if they were kind of like a lien, in a way, but in a way you can kind of control your redemption period a bit, with the judicial sale properties, and that probably is kind of true to a degree where you certainly are dealing with a shorter 60-day redemption period instead, but you probably have a higher chance of it not redeeming though than you would with the normal lien. At least how liens are like 95% redemption and then 5% you own. You probably have at least a 50-50 shot of owning these properties, I would think.
Oh yeah, well, especially with the 60-day. When I was looking through the 60-day, I think that because they've already gone through a full judicial foreclosure, which means that there was, they've already foreclosed on their right to redeem and everything. In fact, they're claiming that you could get quiet title with it. So it's closer to buying a property on the open market in some ways. Sure, there's a chance they're going to redeem, but if they haven't got redeemed, essentially the 1-year redemption period is already up to a degree.
Yeah.
They just have 60 days to get it back in case, the redemption is over. So, in that case, I think that they've got a pretty good chance of getting most of them.
Yeah. So that's a pretty nice property that we were just looking at. Is that it?
This is the one that sold here right here for $17,000.
Holy cow. That was a steal.
Yeah, really good. You can see there are a lot of manufactured homes within the area, so it kind of fits within it. And the county's value, or Redfin's valuing at, 205. You can see it's on a good half-acre lot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So this, built in 2002. So in this case, the investors either going to get the chance to be able to acquire this property for $17,000, or they're going to be able to get 20% on their money. And if it redeems within a few months, you've made that 20% pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, and in buying it, I mean, at that price, they paid less than 10% for it if they can win it at that. I mean, if they can acquire the property at that, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they essentially want it for. So we'll have to see if it doesn't redeem or not. But you can see that there is some opportunity within these. And I think part of the reason this one's sold so high is because of the neighborhood.
You know, and I wonder if the 20% is that, I wonder if they're setting that here on the sales price here, or are they setting that on the value of the property? I wonder.
I believe it's off the total amount. I'd have to go back and
Okay,
look
yeah,
100%
that would make
sure.
sense though. That's kind of like how Texas does it, off of the total amount, so that would make sense.
Yeah. So the next one we're going to look at is this October sale. And we're going to look at this one right here. This sold for 51 grand.
Yeah, interesting. So we can see, yeah, it's got an address there. We can see the owner.
Yeah, it's this house right here. Not quite as good a neighborhood as the last one, but not bad.
Oh,
And,
wow.
you know, valued at 242.
That's another one where they paid just a very small percentage of value. You know, I mean, they paid under 20% on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, got it for a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I guess right around 20% thinking here. But yeah, that's an excellent deal. The one before that was another excellent deal. Both of those are kind of fixer uppers, but they were picked up for, I mean, the first one for 17 and that one for
Yeah.
51.
Yeah, for 51, you know, valued at 242. So let's say once it's completely rehabbed, done nice, it's worth 250. And, you know, they picked it up for 51. They could put nearly 100 grand into rehabbing it and still make 100 grand profit.
Yeah, that's pretty comfortable numbers.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're trying to show with some of these properties that we've been looking through lately is that, you know, if you can make $100,000 with the deal and you can do it, you know, fairly smoothly and quickly, you know, that's going to be a pretty good return on your money. And you do that a few times a year, and that could be a difference for a lot of us.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
next
those.
one we're going to look at is this one right here. This sold for 50,000. And that's actually this commercial building right here. Now, I didn't look into a whole lot of comps on it. I don't really know kind of what the value is. We could take a look at the county and see what
But
the county says.
it's in Savannah, Georgia is where it's located at.
Yeah. Deed Company LLC, that's a pretty basic name.
Yeah.
We can look into the history of it. So, I mean, they're valuing it at 256, 287.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Is it income property? You know, we could take a quick look at the photos and see what their newest photos are.
Oh, it's a different property.
That is a different property. That's kind of interesting. I wonder if they got the wrong property or if the address is wrong, because all the information comes up on that. Unless I'm looking across the street.
It could be. It could be the one right next door. To the right, maybe, or it could be across the street.
Because it says income property. I think the photo's wrong. I could be wrong about that, but I think the photo's wrong because it says it's commercial property.
Yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time we've seen. It would be the first time that we've seen, you know, county records be wrong about something like that.
You know, we can see that there were some renovations done in 2005. Underneath the permits.
Oh, in fact, you can see about how much too, which is nice. You can see, you know, they say about 10,000 that they're
Yeah.
putting into it, 10,000, 20,000, you know, 2,000.
Yeah, so this is a little one of those things where we'd do a little bit more research. And one thing we could do easy is we could just check the map to the GIS map to back up where it's located. And that might be able to tell us. Huh.
It kind of looks like it's a house in the middle of
Yeah, it
somewhere.
does.
Maybe it's not that commercial property. Maybe it's the house in the image.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. Well, we'll do some more research on it. Either way, if it's the house or it's not the house, it ended up selling for.
Yeah, for 50,000. If that was a house, that house looks pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd have to do some more research on that. Sold for 50. I just looked up the address quick as we were going through them.
Yeah, that's funny. It's interesting. Well, and it was definitely a screaming deal.
Well, and that's where due diligence comes in. We would have, as we were going through all the stages, we'd kind of figure that out. So the next one we're going to look at, let me erase this. So the county valued it. I was thinking that maybe this is kind of a little comparable, but it may not even be the commercial property. So this next one here is, let me see. I think it's this one.
One that sold for 49,000. Yeah, on Kessler Avenue.
Oh, I was looking at this one first. This one right here, you can see how it didn't have a purchase price. So I didn't know if that's where I kind of made a mistake. Look at it. It was this one right here, but I was wondering, did nobody bid on it? Did it somehow get redeemed? Because if it get redeemed, why did they keep it on that list? So I thought that was kind of interesting that, this one opened up at only 3,800, but it didn't have a purchase price, which I'd normally think, well, that means that it must have been some kind of junk property, but it appears to be this house right here, valued at 224,000. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I wonder. Well, and they have it listed as excess proceeds money there. Like, yeah, I wonder what they're doing. Maybe they'll resell it. In fact, it's one of the things I noticed there with some of the Texas places was that more and more of the counties, were listing below their regular list. They would have listed their resale properties. Some of the places didn't really separate them though.
Yeah. This property right here ended up selling for 49,000.
That's so it's in a little cul-de-sac there.
Yeah, they might be going. This might be the wrong road. It could be that one. They're valuing it at 218. Built in 1980. That's where I'm kind of wondering. That didn't look like a 1980 to me. That looks like older. I think this may
Yeah.
be the wrong street. I think that was part of the problem when I tried looking it up before.
Yeah, well, in any case, we know that they picked it up for 25% of value, roughly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's plenty of good profit there, and we could figure out exactly. That would be part of the thing to figure it out. But it looks like a home built in 1980, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet. In fact, we could probably easily figure out exactly which one it is by looking at the county. That's one thing that's nice when counties do have photos. Even if it's older, we can verify exactly which house it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was a different property there.
Yeah. So nice little brick home, This was back in 2024. They were still mowing it, but I wonder if it was currently being lived in or not. And we'll look at one more property, which I kind of thought was a little interesting. It was this one right here, 6,700. Oh, 67,000, excuse me.
Oh, we also see that the person's deceased.
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad you pointed that out, because a bunch of these, that one's deceased. This one was deceased. 2 on the other list we were looking at was deceased. It was amazing how many people, were deceased on these lists.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, yeah, it was like half the properties here, they had somebody listed that was deceased.
Yeah, this is actually this lot back here. What I thought was kind of interesting is you can see how they've got 2 different roads for both of these lot owners,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and
So
then
you have to have
there,
easements.
yeah, and then there it goes to 3 roads.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome way though to develop land there. So so that you've got access and you don't have to deal with granting easement rights.
Yeah. Click on this real quick because I want to show the value of this. So we know that there's legal access to it. It's a nice big piece of land. It's residential R4. They're valuing it at 169,000.
Nice. So this is the one that sold for 60,000.
Yeah, 67,000, and it's about 8 acres. So here's kind of where it is on Google. We can kind of come down here and get a street view. The kind of road goes all the way back there, and it looks like the road goes all the way back to the lot, or at least, kind of right there at the lot.
Yeah, that would make sense. It probably does.
You can kind of see where the road goes out here, even looking at here, and then the lot's kind of right over here to the right. So it kind of goes, here's where the lot's at. It goes even all the way up to the top of the lot, or at least they're showing it does.
It actually looks like that area has been harvested of wood before and replanted. If you look at it, it at least from the other imagery we're looking at there, you could see where from right there, you can kind of see looking back in there. So maybe it's just past the area that we're looking at here. We can see where it's harvested up above it here, and they've replanted it.
Yeah.
And that's probably all been replanted too. This stuff right there is still pretty full though.
Yeah, I can't tell if that's Christmas trees or what's going on there, but it does look like they were reharvesting the area. So it has value. Maybe it has use. Maybe that there's a lot of value in that wood as well. Here's where it pulls up on Redfin. So you can actually pull up this property on Redfin. They're valuing it at 214. There's the 8 acres, but in kind of looking at it, I think it's probably even worth more than that.
Yeah, so at 60,000, they'll still do pretty well on this. They'll probably make 150 plus on it.
Yeah, well, and it's probably going to be a pretty easy sell. There could be additional uses at it. We'll look at just a couple more on another list, and then I'll flip it back to you, Shade. Look at the September list. And the first one we're going to look at is this one that sold for 101,000.
Yeah, so it started out at $5,800 and it sold for 101.
Yeah. Now here's the property itself, and part of the reason is, I mean, we can debate about how good a deal it was or why they paid that much, but it's this little house right here, and you can see that they are currently trying to sell it. So that was kind of interesting to me, going down here and looking at the sales information. We can see that they had it tried doing as a rental back in September. And then they listed it for sale starting in November at 280, and they've dropped it down to 225. And then they, kind of took it off or had maybe a potential offer, and then they just relisted it on the 18th, so just a day or two ago.
So if it was listed there, was that a September sale you were looking at? What I'm wondering is like, so if they bought here from Georgia, they have a 1-year redemption period. So these guys are basically they're kind of rushing to get rid of the property right now or to get it sold, so they've got some kind of profit on it, right?
Yeah, they bought it in 2020, for
Okay, that makes
108.
sense.
And then maybe they lived in it, or maybe it was a rental, but they tried relisting it as a rental back in May, about a year ago, or actually even before then. And maybe they rented out and then relisted it. So these could be different times or not. But you can see where they kind of started at 19 and ended up renting it for about 1800. And then starting in November, they listed it for sale for 280. And then they didn't price change it until, January of this year to 275. And then you can see kind of where the listing is. And then they took it off and then just relisted it. So they're currently trying to sell it for 225. And I'm sure that once it does sell, or if it does sell, then it's going to, they're going to earn their 20% on it. And so that's the reason I think the investor paid up, is because these photos are pretty current from them trying to currently list it for sale. He said, worst case scenario, I'm going to make 20% on my money. If not, I'm going to get this house for 100 grand.
Yeah, which 20% on your money on 100,000 is pretty good. Or getting the property for 100,000 is pretty good. So I could see that deal there on this. And yeah, going into it, you would have a little bit more awareness with this one. You can see exactly what they're doing there with the property and how long they've owned it. They probably did buy it and do a remodel on it, and so they probably invested some money and time into getting it fixed up there, and that's why they're initially trying to get 280 for it. But they're
Yeah.
being forced to kind of come down on the price because the market's not quite that strong maybe, and they probably spent a little bit too much on the rehab.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll just look at kind of this little group right here, and then I'll flip it back. But I thought these were kind of interesting. There's quite a few different lots right here that people really kind of paid up for. So you kind of see the same person ended up purchasing them. But there's 4 lots here in this Woodhaven Lane area. And you can see they started about 6 grand, and 2 of them got purchased for 75, and then 1 got purchased for 40, and 1 got purchased for 42.
Yeah, he spent like $200,000 on those lots.
Yeah. And I'll kind of show you where they're at.
Oh, I see. So they're we're talking oceanside here or waterside somehow.
Well, they've got something here, but there's a lot of water over here
There.
and kind of golf courses and stuff. So they've got
Okay,
some
I got you.
that might be kind of the floodplain that we're seeing there.
Yeah, definitely no ocean.
No, no, not oceanfront, but they are nice.
Yeah.
A bunch of new construction within the area. So these are all kind of new homes. You can see they're doing construction right here. All of these are pretty new. So it's kind of right here on the corner is that first one.
I wonder if this is a developer, or builder.
It could be, one thing that's interesting is one of these is already redeemed, so he made 20% on it pretty quickly. The other 2 aren't, because they're all for sale right now.
Could just be, yeah.
The person's trying to sell them, and if they do sell them, he's going to get, just his 20%. But they're all $200,000 more plus each. So it's
Really,
this
yeah.
one.
So each lot's a $200,000 value.
Yeah, at least. I mean, here's this one right here. Is one of the lots. This is the lot that just redeemed. And so, it's sold for 128,000.
Oh, for 200.
285,000.
Yeah, yeah, that's a ton of money for a 0.7 acre lot. Wow.
Yeah. Here's the other lot they're trying to get 269 for. This lot they're trying to get 325 for. And so these are the lots that are currently on that this person purchased.
Wow.
And this lot they're trying to get 270 for.
Yeah.
So
That's crazy. Every one of those, I mean, because they paid 50. I mean, even what they paid there at the 50 is nothing compared to the values on those, if they can actually, acquire any of those in the end. But even making 20% on everything they've got there, they'll make 20 to $40,000 on on these lots, or they acquire them.
Yeah, they paid two of the lots. They paid 75 each, kind of the more expensive ones, the ones that are the 300 to 325. Then they bought one for 40 and one for 42 grand. So worst case scenario, they're going to make 20% on their money. They can sit back. They don't have to worry about it. If not, they're getting a $270,000 lot to a $325,000 lot for, a small percentage of value. And he's listing these aggressively,
Yeah,
because he's trying to sell them. So there's lots that they're asking even more than that.
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, overall, and what's kind of interesting is, he already got paid back the interest on that one because it was a September sale, and you can see that they sold it in October.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, so within less than, within 30 days, he made 20% on his money on that lot.
Yeah, that's hard to beat.
Yeah, so I'll flip this back to you, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So we've talked about, Georgia from a pre-sell where we go and look at the upcoming auctions, but there's still good deals happening, looking at some of the sold properties as well.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with those numbers. They look pretty good. And you can certainly see why the investors are making the deals. The numbers work.